This unit will give you a better understanding of the Motor Vehicles Act and how it impacts your community. If you remember back to Unit 1, we talked about your duties and powers. We explained that you are an officer as defined in the Motor Vehicles Act, and that you are responsible for enforcing it within the boundaries of your municipality. Therefore, it is important that you are familiar with this Act and how it relates to your job. A copy of the Motor Vehicles Act is included under the Supplemental Materials menu item. You should have it handy so that you can look up the specific sections we refer to as we go along. You'll notice that the word highway comes up a lot in the Motor Vehicles Act. In this unit, we'll be using the definition from the Act, which says that a highway is a road, place, bridge, or structure, whether publicly or privately owned, that the public is ordinarily entitled or permitted to use for the passage of vehicles. So the word highway doesn't just refer to a highway in the usual sense. Here it means any type of road in your municipality. The Territorial Motor Vehicles Act is made up of 12 parts. We will now go over some of the sections of Part 4, the rules of the road, that you may find yourself facing when you are enforcing the traffic flow in your community. Many of these rules will seem like common sense, but you may come across some rules you've never heard of. Section 153 is about an officer having the power to give pedestrians or drivers direction to do something that goes against the Motor Vehicles Act or a bylaw. An example of when this might happen is if there was a car accident and part of a highway had to be shut down. A bylaw officer might direct vehicles to temporarily drive in the wrong lane to get around the accident. The officer would do this in order to maintain the orderly movement of traffic or to prevent injury or damage to persons or property. The driver or pedestrian would have to obey this direction, and even though they are technically breaking a rule, they cannot be charged for an offense. Section 154 says that no driver can operate a vehicle without due care, attention, and reasonable consideration for other drivers. Section 169 deals with speeding. The speed within a municipality is 50 kilometers per hour, unless otherwise posted. The speed outside a municipality is 90 kilometers per hour, unless otherwise posted. Section 171 says that no driver is allowed to drive at an unreasonable speed. A driver may be driving within the speed limit, but because of certain conditions, they could still be driving at an unreasonable speed. For example, on a very icy street, the speed limit might be 50 kilometers per hour, when it would be much safer to go 30 kilometers per hour. Section 186 says that no driver can go over the speed limit when passing another vehicle. Section 192 says that no driver can follow another vehicle more closely than is reasonable in the circumstances. In other words, no tailgating. Sections 200 and 201 explain that a driver must use signals when performing left and right turns. This is normally the signal lights, but if the signal lights are not working, the driver has to use arm signals. Section 212 says that a driver must stop at the stop sign before they enter the intersection. Section 217 says that a driver has to stop his or her vehicle before it reaches a bus with its lights flashing and cannot proceed until the lights stop flashing. Section 219 lists all of the places where it is prohibited to park. For example, no one is allowed to park in front of a public or private driveway, within an intersection, on a sidewalk, or within 3 meters of a fire hydrant. There are many other restricted parking areas as well. See Section 219 for the full list. Section 223 says leaving a vehicle with the engine running is prohibited unless all of the doors are locked, or if the vehicle is a delivery truck or some other public service truck, or if the vehicle is being loaded or unloaded. Section 224 says that no person can leave a vehicle parked for more than 72 hours on a highway without a note. Abandoning a vehicle on either public or private property without permission from the property owner is prohibited. Section 226 says that you cannot have more people than seats in a vehicle, and there cannot be more than one person to a seat. This does not apply to buses, emergency vehicles, or enforcement vehicles. Section 232 says that no one is allowed to leave or dump any glass, nails, tacks, or scraps of metal, or any rubbish, refuse, or waste on a highway. Section 235 and Section 236 are about stunts and races. No driver can do a stunt that is likely to startle another driver, and racing is prohibited. Section 237 says that no person can ride on the outside of a motor vehicle or in the box of a truck. There are many exceptions to this rule, which you can look up on your own. Section 243 says that drivers and passengers on a motorcycle are required to wear helmets. In Part 8, Enforcement, we are going to look at Sections 285 and 303. Section 285 is your power to stop a vehicle. As an officer, you can stop a vehicle to check that both the driver and the vehicle comply with the requirements of the Motor Vehicles Act. If someone is directed to stop by an officer, they must do so. Section 303 says that an officer can seize a radar detection device that is inside or attached to a motor vehicle on a highway. Radar detection devices are illegal in the Northwest Territories. In Part 11, Offenses and Punishment, we are going to look at Sections 337 and 338. Section 337 sets a minimum fine for certain offenses related to registration, insurance, accidents, and written reports to police. Section 338 sets a maximum punishment for any person guilty of an offense under the Motor Vehicles Act at a $5,000 fine, 6 months imprisonment, or both. In Part 12, Bylaws, we are going to look at Sections 345 to 348. Section 345 states that if a council sets a speed limit, they have to post signs to show the public what the speed limit is, or else no one can be charged for speeding. Except if council sets the speed limit at 50 kilometers per hour, they do not have to post signs, and people can be charged for speeding if they go over the speed limit. Section 346 gives the council authority to set up traffic control devices. Traffic control devices are any signs, signals, lights, lines, or markings. This section gives the council the authority to write its own bylaws for the control of vehicles and pedestrians. There is a long list of all the bylaws council can impose. Section 347, subsection 2, is also very important. This section states that a bylaw made under Section 347 must not be inconsistent with the Motor Vehicles Act or the regulations, and no bylaw can be written to control Part 1 or 2 of the Motor Vehicles Act. This means that any bylaws the community writes surrounding motor vehicles have to obey the rules of this Act. Section 348 states that the punishment for a breach of a bylaw cannot exceed the punishment set out in Part 11. This means that if someone is charged with a breach of one of the council's bylaws, the punishment will be a fine of no more than $5,000 or 6 months in prison, or both. Your council might have reasons to create a bylaw that is tailored to the unique needs of your community. For example, the community may feel that 50 kilometers per hour is too fast for some or all of their roads and may wish to lower speed limits. Another example is if the council is aware of special transportation problems resulting from yearly flooding or ice jams, or other needs in your community that can be helped by passing municipal bylaws. Be familiar with your local motor vehicles bylaws. Now you should have a basic understanding of the Motor Vehicles Act, but because this act is a very big part of your job, It is important that you go through it again on your own and make sure you know all of the rules.